What shall we do that we may work the works of God? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of John on Walking Through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to John chapter 6. We're going to be reading from verses 22 to 29. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, John chapter 6, beginning at verse 22. On the following day, when the people were standing on the other side of the sea, saw that there was no other boat there except that the one which the disciples had entered, and that Jesus had not entered the boat with his disciples, but his disciples had gone away alone. However, other boats came from Tiberias, near the place where they ate bread after the Lord had given thanks. When the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they also got into boats and came to Capernaum, seeking Jesus. And when they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you come here? Jesus answered them and said, Most assuredly I say to you, you seek me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate of the loaves and were filled. Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you, because God the Father has set his seal on him. Then they said to him, What shall we do that we may work the works of God? Jesus answered and said to them, This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent. So far in this chapter, we have discussed two stories that we have previously discussed in the other Gospels, namely the feeding of the 5,000 and Jesus walking on the sea. However, in the book of John, I don't believe John included these stories exclusively for this purpose, though this would be 2 of the 7 signs Jesus performed in the book of John, for people had the other Gospels for that. Instead, I believe John included these stories in order to get us to the rest of Jesus' teachings surrounding this miracle, which will lead us we will discuss in the next few lessons as the first I am statement found in this book. You see, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all included the feeding of the 5,000, and Matthew and Mark included Jesus walking on the water, but all three used these stories to only demonstrate Jesus' miraculous power. John, however, is the only one who deals with Jesus' teaching the next day, teaching that is going to offend many people. Because Jesus walked on the sea as the disciples were traveling west, they were back on the west side of the Sea of Galilee, in the Galilee region. However, many of the people that he fed the previous day were still on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. Why did they stay? Because they thought that Jesus was going to be there. And as we learn in today's reading, because they wanted to be fed again. When they saw that Jesus wasn't there, they knew that he must have crossed over the Sea of Galilee. And so they got into boats themselves in order to find Jesus. They finally caught up with him in Capernaum, which according to our map, is not far from the Sea of Galilee and often where Jesus would base himself when in Galilee. When the multitude found Jesus, they asked him why he came there. Why didn't he simply stay with them where they were the day before? Jesus knew their hearts and knew that they didn't seek him because they saw the signs and wanted to hear his message, but because they had eaten of the loaves and fish and were filled. In other words, they wanted to be fed again. This is the problem with the social gospel today. Oftentimes people want the church to set up food kitchens and food pantries, something that individuals, not the church, are tasked in doing in order to help the poor of this world as an outreach tool in order to reach the lost. They figure that if people come for the food, they will also stay to hear the gospel, and some will be saved. Apart from the fact that, again, it is not the church's responsibility to feed the poor of this world, that is the individual Christian's task to assist in, this type of outreach tool simply doesn't work. People will come for the food, and if you stop providing food, people will stop coming. That is evident by what happened to Jesus here. Now, Jesus did nothing wrong with feeding these people, for he was being compassionate. But notice when Jesus fed these people, it was after he taught them, and not before. And he didn't draw the people to him with the promise of food. He fed them because otherwise they were going to faint on the way home for lack of food. Thus, Jesus feeding this crowd was clearly divorced from his spreading the gospel. Jesus continued his discussion here in John 6:27 by telling the people not to labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life, the food which the Son of Man, Jesus, would give them. Is Jesus saying to these people to stop working for their physical food? No, for that would contradict other of his teachings and the later teachings of the apostles. What we have here in verse 27 is a not but clause that we sometimes find in our New Testaments. Oftentimes when we see this clause, what the passage is saying is, do not set your primary focus on the first thing mentioned, but set your focus on the second thing mentioned. So in this case, people weren't to primarily focus on their physical food, but their spiritual food. For in the end, the physical food will perish, but if you fed your spirit with the spiritual food that doesn't perish, you will obtain everlasting life. The people were focusing on the physical. Jesus wanted them to focus on the spiritual. The people's response is, what shall we do that we may work the works of God? Jesus said that this is the work of God, that you may believe in him who was sent from God, namely Jesus. Notice here, belief is described as a work, a personal work that we may do. For my friends in the denominational world out there who teach that a person can do no works in order to be saved, Jesus disagrees with you right here in John 6:29. Belief is a work. No, it will not earn your salvation, but it is a work of God, not in the sense that God forces us to believe, but that God is the reason for our belief. Because when we believe on the one who was sent from God, whom if he didn't send, we would have nothing to believe on. Of course, when Jesus says to believe, he is not talking about faith alone, for Jesus said in Luke chapter 6, verse 46, but why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do the things which I say? Belief requires action, something that will be evident as we continue on in John 6. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of John chapter 6, verses 30 to 40, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.